Thanks,
All
Alex,
right.
for having me today.
Lisa, thank you. So I'm Alec. I'm one of the partners and a co-founder at Gotham Artists, a speakers bureau. And in the what I call BV, the before virus times, you would put Lisa and people like Lisa all over stages across the world. And we're all adapting to this new world, this virtual world. And we do a Monday morning meeting every Monday, 11 a.m. sharp. And we could certainly use some help in improving those and not have those be a time waster. So I'm excited to learn as much from this as anyone else. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to Ivy for setting this up and Michelle Carter for setting this up with Lisa. Thank you so much. And for everyone who came, I'm sure everyone is curious to hear from Lisa. And just a brief introduction, the CEO and founder of Future Think, which I think if you sum it up in a single word, simplicity, right? It's about simplifying. Things don't need to be as complex as they appear. And if we can simplify it, it'll be better for all of us. That's my short version of what you do. I'm sure you'll give a much better understanding to all of us. And I can't wait to hear. So put me on mute. That's as much public speaking as I like to do.
Thanks, Alec. I'll come back to you at the very end, but thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I am Lisa Bodell. I am the CEO of Future Think, and Alex said it very well. I run a company here in New York. We're located in the Chrysler Building, and now all over the world, working from home. We are a company that helps people be more productive, better embrace change, and frankly, get to the work that matters. People can't reach their potential, both personally and in their lives, if they're working on things that are unnecessary, that are time sucks, and aren't able to focus on work that is really ties to the vision versus just ties to process every day. Part of that problem has to do with meetings. So what we want to do today is we want to give you one of our free 15-minute work hacks and tell you a little bit about what we do and have you just experience how we do it. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch my presentation here. So just give me a second, because it takes a second. All right. And there we go. All right. Hopefully everybody now is able to see the PowerPoint presentation. Everyone should be on mute. If you are not on mute, please do. We have a lot of participants, and I'm hoping that everybody can see the screen. And what we're going to do now, hold on one second. There we go. Okay, I want to dive in. A little bit more about me. I started Future Think 20 years ago, and my idea was to help people better embrace change and come up with bigger ideas, really help them reinvent themselves every day. And change is hard for a lot of people. And one of the reasons is they resist it, and the other thing is they don't have time. What we did is we designed all our accelerated learning, but also these 15-minute work hack webinars for teams that are time-starved and are remote. And what we want to do today is help you better embrace the topic we're about to talk about. So let me do a little bit of housekeeping for people, because this is important in any meeting. We're going to use two functions today. The first is chat, and the second is raising your hand. Do me a favor, if you can everybody here, if you're an attendee, raise their hand in the toolbar, in the panelist bar. Fantastic. Raising your hand, everybody raise it. Okay, now I'm going to actually lower all hands, and we're going to use that again in the future. So here we go. Let's dive in and let's talk a little bit about the topic today. Today we're going to talk about the best virtual meeting ever. This is important for a few reasons. Number one, it's how we now work. And the second thing is, it's important because we have to realize we've been doing virtual meetings for a while. It's just now we're doing them consistently and all the time. How can we make them better so we don't have burnout? There's 4 things that I want to approach with you today. If you have a pen and paper, there's going to be a lot of tips and tricks. Please write them down. If you don't feel like it, no big deal. This is being recorded and we'll send it to you after. The 4 things I want to go over are this. First of all, how do you normalize being virtual? Second, how do you set a protocol? Third, how do you relentlessly moderate? And fourth, how do you persistently engage? All these things are incredibly important to having a successful virtual meeting. First things first, let's start with normalizing being virtual. Now, if I have to ask you how you run meetings right now, and if you're doing a good job, I wonder what you'd say. Let's actually launch a poll and see your answer to that. I'd like to hear how effective you are right now in terms of having good meetings. Take a look on your screen, and here's the first question I want to pose. How effective are your teams remote meetings. Uber effective, mostly effective, sometimes effective, rarely effective. Please do not make me do another Zoom meeting. Make your choice. And in about 10 seconds, I'm going to end the polling and share the results. Got over 100 people already polling in with us. And I got over 130 that have answered. Okay, I'm going to close the polling and share the results. Oh, let me go back here. Here's the results. Mostly effective. I'm not surprised, that's what everybody says. You get things done, right? You have meetings, you know how to use Zoom. That's fine, but how can you really make them something that's productive, collaborative, and a positive experience? So let's get into that. I'm going to close the results here, and let's get started. The first thing we want to do is let's spend more time normalizing being virtual. Now, what do I mean by that? I think the first thing is that we really need to do a better job of a couple of things. The first is using video. And the reason I say that is because audio is passive, video is active. Imagine if you were still in the before COVID world and you walked into a conference room and half of the people were sitting at the table and half of them were under it. That's what it's like being in a meeting right now where half of the people have themselves not on video and half of them do. Being on video is a really powerful thing and we should get used to it because it's more personal and it gets better results. We know through studies that using video makes people 27% more attentive and productive in their meeting. Why is this? Because they are more attuned to their behaviors and their responsibility in that meeting. Part of this comes from social science, and you might find this interesting. There was a study in Chicago that was done in bars. And the bars that had mirrors behind the bartenders had better behaved patrons. Why? Because they could see their behavior in the mirror. And the result was they were more patient, they were kinder, they were less drunk and rowdy, which for some meetings might be a good thing, and they actually spent more money. It's the same thing that translates in your meetings. When people are on video, they behave better because we know that half of the time they're looking at the person speaking and the other people in the meeting, and half of the time they're looking at themselves. If you want to have a better meeting, put them on video. The other thing we need to do is we need to get people comfortable with that. And part of that is sharing your environment and having better backgrounds. Some of us are forced right now to have a makeshift office that we weren't prepared for. But we all know that when we get on video, we're looking at where people are sitting and what's going on in their home. Why not normalize it? What we did in our office is we actually gave a tour, a virtual tour of everyone's individual office on our first status meeting. And we had everybody show something in their space. That could be the kid that interrupts, or it could be the cat that's always jumping on your lap, or it could be the book on the shelf or the piece of art that you're really proud of. The idea is that by personalizing it and humanizing it, we take the elephant out of the room. The other thing we do is we have fun with it, and we share some of our best backgrounds ever. We invite people every week to put a new background up and use that as part of the backdrop of their meeting. You can do the same thing with your team to make it fun. Okay, so we normalized behavior, but now we need to set a protocol. The second thing I'd love to actually run a poll on is to figure out from you, do you have a protocol at work? Let me actually, if I can launch a poll here, see for the people that are on this call, do you have an established protocol for remote meetings? Yes or no? I'll give everybody about 10 seconds. Do you have a remote protocol? Already got 100 people answered. Let me just give it a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds. Okay, let's launch the results. Surprise. 76%, that's 3/4 of you, do not have a protocol. The reason this is important is because we assume everyone knows what's allowable or doable or presentable in a meeting, and most people don't. Let's talk about having a protocol and what that really means. So when I talk about protocol, here's what I'm talking about. I'd like people, especially if you're going to be using video, to outline what you want in terms of a meeting. First things first for people. Oops. First, share a short agenda. Every meeting that we have, every Zoom invite that goes out or Teams invite that goes out has a 3-bullet agenda of what we are going to accomplish. If you don't have enough to accomplish with an agenda, you probably don't need a meeting, you need a phone call. Should people wait or join? We always make people, if it's a big group, have a waiting room. If it's a small group, less than 10, they can join on their own. Video or not, all our meetings are video, period. That's our protocol. Do you have to announce yourself or not? We do not announce ourselves. We at FutureThink find that annoying and distracting, so we do not have that noise. The other thing we say is, if it's greater than 15 minutes for meeting, it's a video. If it's less than 15 minutes, it's a phone call or a chat. We're getting right now in a real rut in terms of Zoom calls, and people are getting zoomed out. Remember, there's a lot of different things you can do between chat, picking up the phone, and just doing email. Emails for information, meetings are for decisions. Try and follow that protocol. Okay, let's go on to the next. The third thing is relentlessly moderating. I don't think people realize that they need to play an active role, that there's a person who runs the meeting or is a decision maker in the meeting to move it along. I have a few key guidelines that I've seen other clients do that I think you might find interesting. First of all, think of yourself when you're running a meeting, if it's your meeting, as a tour guide. It's your job, like you're holding that red umbrella in a group, to constantly frame the discussion, discuss what you decided, and keep it moving. So think about when you have your next meeting, how you're going to microframe it, how you're going to keep it moving along. And then finally, one of my recommendations that I really like is stop using the term next steps and talk about decisions. Next steps are passive, and I think people blow them off. If you instead talk about what we agreed to and decided to, that makes everybody feel an ownership that they were part of that decision. So talk about decisions, not next steps. Finally, what I want to talk about, and this is probably the most important, is how do you persistently engage the people that are involved? What's really interesting to me is when people are running a meeting, they don't realize people's attention span. This chart right here is the average attention span in a presentation for participants. Now take a look at this. When a meeting starts, everyone is really excited. They're engaged. Within 10 minutes, it's fallen into the abyss, right? People are bored, it's boring, people are droning on and on, they don't know the agenda, and only at the end do people pick up again and get really excited. Probably because it's almost over, not because it was a good meeting. The best meetings, and by the way, for everybody here, because you're in the business of presentations and keynotes, you know that to get the audience's attention, especially in this world of ADD, you really need to do resets every 5 minutes. And the job is really, no matter what meeting you're doing, whether it's a status meeting or a remote presentation, it's not about entertainment, it's about engagement. And let me tell you what I mean. I want to show you just shy of 15 ways I think you can better engage people during your meetings. Your job during your meeting is to 10x your meeting, right? Don't just have a good meeting, have an awesome meeting. I'd like you to try one of these a week. Some seem simple, but you just don't use them well. Some are cool and different and might amp up how you guys collaborate. So first, let's look at the bucket of collaboration. Rather than having a bunch of talking heads, screen share. Have a document, have a slide, have a picture, something that anchors people to look at versus just a talking head. Second, file sharing. We do a lot of file sharing in our meetings so people can see an agenda, not just hear it. We also do breakouts. If you have a group of 10 or more and you're trying to make a decision, never be afraid to just randomly assign people to breakouts, discuss it, and come back together. The other thing you can do, which really is underutilized, is whiteboard or share a Google Doc so you can capture ideas in real time and people can see the discussion live on paper. The next thing you can do is participate. There's a lot of different ways that you can participate during a meeting. We've used some of them here that are quick and easy versus discussion. Hand raising is for agreements. Emoticons are for feelings. Chat is for ideas, so people think before they speak. And polling, of course, is to drive decisions or just to have fun. The next bucket here is activate. I really think people could do a better job with their meetings if they don't just treat them like meetings. We actually, with one of our clients, ran a challenge. I talk about this one a lot. We ran a 30-minute Kill a Stupid Rule challenge. We brought people together. And we said, rather than talking about the problem, let's solve it. We gave them 30 minutes. We invited them in the chat to kill all the stupid rules that they thought were holding them back from doing a better job. We discussed them, and then we took a poll and voted on them. Run a challenge. The second thing is having guest appearances. It's kind of cool to have somebody drop in, give a quick knowledge drop about something that's related to the topic at hand, or just something interesting that your team might want to learn, to inject some fresh thinking. The final thing you can do is personalize. Not every meeting has to be about work. I've had a few clients, in fact, just today with my NBC client, he invited me to a virtual cuppa, and we had a virtual cup of joe, and the only requisite was that we had to bring our favorite mug. We have clients that have invited us to non-working lunches, 30 minutes where we talk about no business at all. I encourage a lot of clients also to set up 15-minute brain dates. That's a great way to get people to collaborate across their organization to learn about what other people do in a short amount of time. People don't like to commit to long meetings anymore, but they love to talk about what they do for at least 15. The final thing I'll share with you is having meetings that start with either icebreakers or skill builders that help people exercise new muscles. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, with a bunch of my trainers, we were talking about the issue of pivoting during COVID. And we used an exercise in the beginning called That's Fantastic. And That's Fantastic is a 5-minute exercise that teaches people how to reframe problems as possibilities. And we had to constantly talk to each other, and all we did was keep throwing problems at each other. And the only way you're allowed to respond was with, "That's fantastic." Let me give you an example. Well, we can't travel on planes anymore, and we can't have live events. There will be no more live keynotes for the rest of the year. That's not true. I would respond with, "That's fantastic. I've always wanted to be able to show how I can do things virtually in a shorter amount of time. Maybe I can do more shorter keynotes versus longer keynotes." Or, "You know what, that's fantastic. I was never able to use a lot of technology on stage because I had to be up there presenting, but now I can use a range of technology in my keynotes that I couldn't have before." Using techniques like that at the beginning of a meeting or in place of a meeting can really energize people and help you solve problems faster. So I hope some of these are great ways that you can have the best meeting ever, whether that's normalizing being virtual, setting a protocol, relentlessly moderating like a tour guide, or persistently engaging and trying one new thing a week. That's going to help you have the best meeting ever. Your goal actually as a leader is to get people not just to come together, but to work together. And some of these are ways that we can just do that a little bit differently and have much better meetings. So that's all for my presentation. I promised you 15 minutes, and I want to be able to share these slides with you after so you can actually have the best meeting ever and share these with your team. So I hope you learned something new. And with that, what I'd like to do is I'm going to unmute Alec again. And I would love to invite people to tap into the chat or the Q&A. And what we can do is answer some questions. So Alec, are you there?
I'm here, and I'm amazed. You said 15 minutes, you did 15 minutes.
Here we are.
Speakers, they can't stop hearing themselves talk, so I'm very impressed.
Well, one of my goals, Alec, just so you know too, there's definitely a, there's a multi-purpose to this presentation. One is, first of all, Alec, thank you for bringing together your great group of people. I mean, clearly you have a very diverse, cool network. They're very energized. And thank you for showcasing not just this content, but our ability to pivot to remote. I think it's got to be very hard for the people on this call to just rethink how they do business so quickly and to find people that can help them do it, because what you do in the offline world is not the same in the online world. And you've got to find people, right, and teams that can do that. So hopefully this helps them too.
Yeah, and certainly we have a lot to learn. Like every other company, we pivoted to an online business in
overnight.
Yeah, it's 11 years to build the company and like 11 days to rebuild the company. So I think one of the questions I would kick off to you is,
Great.
you know, we're a small organization, 15 people. Kind of, even when things aren't working perfectly, it's a manageable enough size. When I'm speaking of virtual meetings. So
True.
What advice do you have for larger, at what point is a meeting no longer a meeting and it's a webinar or it can't even be done? Is there a natural limit to those things, and the differences between small organizations and the types of meetings they need versus larger companies and larger membership-driven organizations.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's usually, it's kind of like how we run workshops. When you get over about 30 people, there's laws of, it's based on the law of chaos theory, which really is once you get over about 30 people in a virtual environment, it tends to be more of a one-way conversation versus a two-way conversation. And the bigger that the group is, the more that we need to use some of these tips and tricks. And I know some of them seem basic to people, but to better engage. So for example, if you have over 30 people, that's when you need to start having breakouts. You need to start using chat. You need to start using polls, because otherwise what happens is you get either the extroverts or a dominant personality that dominates the conversation, and not all voices can be heard. So I usually like to think in terms of 30. Smaller is always better. And once you do get over a bigger limit, by the way, of 30, it starts to be that you need more than one person, just like you and I today, talking and moderating. You might need a co-host or a co-moderator.
And just to follow up to that is, how do leaders or meeting leaders, how do they get the best out of maybe their introverts? People who even in a live environment aren't going to be the first to speak, but we know they have good ideas. How do we get them involved in this format?
I love that you're saying that, because it's interesting. When I'm live on stage, I do an exercise actually where I show people the introverts tend to have to meld to the extroverts, which is a problem. How do you get their voice heard? That's where the technology comes in, and better moderating. So a good moderator knows how to mix up the groups, right? So we actually mix up the breakouts, we randomize them, we call on different people, we plant seeds in advance, and we also use technology versus just voice. So that's where the power of the chat comes in, and when the power of polling and hand raising comes in. So that's why also to diversify your meeting and have all voices be heard, I think you're really smart to get everyone engaged through those technologies. You're limited in Teams and WebEx versus in Zoom, but there are ways to get people involved. Hey, a couple other things here, by the way, Alec, just to build on what you just said. There's a couple things in the chat. Do you mind if I look at a couple?
Yeah, I was about to turn it over to the chat questions that are coming.
Yeah, I think you and I are both looking at the same thing. Here's one from Michael. What's your thought on speakers, presenters sitting rather than standing, having a space to be able to move about? What a great question. I think that having a space to move about, more like a stage, is really cool. And I've had, it's funny, before COVID, I still had a lot of those. I did a lot of work with Accenture. I've been a virtual avatar before, live remotely as an avatar in a room. There's been a lot of different things. I think having someone be standing and presenting is fine if it's a one-way presentation versus something like this. If you're presenting a lot of information, you want to have people interact. Someone standing and walking around, it's more about them and the information versus the group and interactivity. So I would use it only in certain circumstances. The goal is I shouldn't be distracting. I should be supporting the information. Let's see, here's another one. Good tips for meetings. Okay, let me keep going here.
I like this one on how do you break bad habits, from my friend Jeff. Bad habits are forming 8 weeks into his virtual meetings.
I would say, well, it depends on the habit, really. But so that's where, frankly, two things. That's where I think a protocol comes in that everyone agrees on. And now there's something key with that, right? It's I don't know that protocol should be dictated. There are certain things that should be dictated. So for example, I say in my company, it's going to be video. Some people might not like it, but we've got to get comfortable with it. Remember, before COVID, everybody said distance learning and distance keynotes couldn't be done. So that's a resistance to change thing. But also with protocol, it's great to get other people's opinions on it, because the way to change habits is to get people's buy-in on them. And if they feel that they're a part of the change, they're more likely to change. The other thing about habits is, I think that once you announce the protocol, you have to communicate it. So just because you agreed on it, I think you have to be relentless about it in terms of how you facilitate. Because the minute you tell somebody, oh, it's okay if you're not on mute, and you let it go again and again, they're not going to change their habits. So the thing about changing habits isn't just establishing what they are, but being persistent about it. All right, let's see what's another one here. I work for higher education. How do you with Gen Zers, my kids are Gen Zers, who do not value video and refrain from sharing video? That's interesting, Mark. I feel like some of the Zers that I work with love video, and it's more like my generation that doesn't want to do video. So that's really, really funny. So maybe your protocol is not to use it. I mean, that's another thing, which is establish the protocol that gets people either most comfortable or figure out a way that you can get them involved and normalize it. So sometimes with people, especially when they're younger, they just resist change because they don't like it or they don't look cool. If there's a way that you can actually get them involved and be able to get comfortable with it, that's going to be the way to go. Here's another one from Jane. I teach on Zoom, so I've used some of these techniques. I also offer them a break to stand up, stretch, okay, etc. That's really cool. I think one of the things that Jane is saying and contributing, thank you, Jane, for that, is if you have longer meetings, I like to encourage not having longer meetings. Having breaks to stand up and stretch is great. And also using music is a great way to kind of shake things up and get people involved in a different way. One note for people here is I found a lot of success right now with micro meetings. And the reason why is twofold. One, people have ADD and they don't like long meetings and it forces you to be more succinct. And two, commitment. People are zoomed out and they're more likely to commit to a 15-minute meeting than they are to a 45 or an hour. So if you can at least get them in with a 15 and it goes over, that's better than inviting them to a 60-minute and having them not even attend. Sorry, Alex, I'm just taking them as I see them here, Alec.
I'm having fun watching.
Okay, you have a lot of really active, good questions here. I gotta say, this is a good audience. Do you have a recommendation on how to strengthen your ability to work with someone simply by trying them? Or do you recommend any particular sources? And so I'm a big proponent of don't try all of these, try one of these. Because I think what's gonna happen within your culture and people's personality is certain ones are gonna be different at different times. So for example, with my group, they really love polling and raising their hand. With other groups I found, they really like the interactivity and the human interaction. So my trick is try one a week and see what sticks, and then that's gonna help you drive your protocol. And your protocols might be different for different groups, FYI. So for example, the protocol that I use with my trainers who are really fun, agile, need to be interactive, gotta be verbal, moving around group is all about the live. With my team, it's more about the interactivity, showing shared docs and polling. It's okay to have different protocols for different groups. Let me take one more, Alec.
Go for it.
Okay, because we're almost at 1:30 and I wanna make sure we're sticking to people's time. Alec, you do have someone, Francine from Portland, by the way. Lisa said there'll be keynotes in the future. How needs 1,000. We are selling the series, not knowing when we can meet. Does she know something we don't?
As in, when will live events come back? When
that's what I'm reading. All right, so here's my opinion on that, because that's what we all want to know, right, Alec?
I want to know when they'll come back, and I also want to know when they're allowed to come back. Will people want to come back? That's a deep.
Here's my opinion on it. Okay, and I take it for what it is. What do I know, right? But my opinion is this. I feel like my expertise is in human behavior and change. And humans like to be, it's all about what's happening right now. But there's a long history to these things in terms of events and change and disruption. And we like to be very black and white. I think what's going to happen in the future is there are most definitely going to be more virtual meetings because one, people are used to being home now and they're not going to want to travel as much. So it's a work-life balance. And two, hey, employers are figuring out that they can save a lot of money. And that's going to be the big driver. However, there is nothing to replace human interaction. And we are social animals, period. And the reason we're getting zoomed out is because we are craving human interaction. And so I do not think that we are going to be only virtual. I think in the future, and as soon as it's possible, we are going to start to have live events again. But I do think it's going to be a hybrid. Going forward, I think the agencies and the agents and the people that are going to survive know how to do live events and know how to do virtual events. So what that means for me as a keynoter is I would be out of business if all I could do right now is only be on stage. I think in the future, I'm going to have to be on stage and moderate that remote audience. I just am. That's all that, if it's live, it's still going to be a hybrid, and I'm going to have to know how to pivot like right now and give shorter virtual keynotes. So it's going to be shorter events virtually and live on stage. I still think it's going to be some kind of hybrid and interactivity. I do not think in-person events are going away at all. I just think it's going to take a little bit of time for people to feel comfortable to get up to speed. What do you think, Alec?
I think 2020 is shot. 2021, there's a lot of hope. for, and it'll come back in I think stages. Hybrid events will be a thing, and smaller, it'll start more VIP events. An event that had 5,000 people, maybe we'll have 500 people, and
I agree with,
550 people.
yeah. Well, it's interesting now, because then imagine a world where being in person is a privilege.
Exactly. It'll be the next thing you can set an upsell on. Oh, if you want to come live, you know, where before a sales meeting might have the top 10% of salespeople at a giant company, it might have the top 1%.
Well, I think that also puts pressure on events people that now getting together, it's not just a boondoggle anymore. Like, this is important, right? This is the one time where we really are going to get together literally, right? And interact. So the human interaction is going to be really important. How we collaborate, not just talk on stage. I think the need for interactivity, I think you're going to need to have speakers, presenters, the events that you do, whatever the whole, breakouts are, that are really good at getting people connected and learning. Right? This isn't just a boondoggle anymore, like we said. And I also think that this is going to put a lot of emphasis on technology. So the best presenters and the best agents are going to be the ones that understand that it's not just somebody who can drone on stage. They got to be able to interact with people in a way that gets them collaborating live, using polling, getting people virtual and remote in different time zones. I also think people now are working, the good news, bad news about virtual is we were working longer. So it's convenient that I work from home, but man, do I work a lot of hours. So I think that people are going to want shorter events. So it's going to be really interesting in terms of, are we really going to accelerate and shorten what we do, but that time has to be even more impactful. Just my thoughts.
I think that's a great place to end it. We promised no more than 15. We're at 30 minutes.
We got to go. Right.
We gotta go. The closing thoughts are just I'll let you have the last word, Lisa, but just want to thank you again. Thank Ivy and Michelle for setting this up. And I'm very excited to see you in person one day, not too far.
Me too. Me too. There's nothing, to me, there's nothing better than being on a stage. And I miss it, and I can't wait for it to happen again, trust me. But I do want to give everybody comfort here that we appreciate the partner with Gotham. They've been great in terms of pivoting hard. As a company that practices change, I think it's so important to pivot and get it, lean into the change, because it's not going to go away. It's just going to be different. To everybody here, thank you so much for your time. There will be a recording that I'm sure that we'll have us or Gotham send to you as a thank you for attending. And I hope that you're interested with clients, doing it with your own clients, because I think these 15-minute brain dates or these 15-minute presentations might be the wave of the future. And I hope that we can do them with you. So Alec, you guys are great. Thank you for being wonderful partners.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, everybody. See you soon. Thanks, Ivy. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Alec. Bye, everyone.